Each time February rolls around, I remind us of that sacred St. Bridget Day. So would you pray with me with her words? O loving day star, we would like the angels of heaven to be among us. We would like an abundance of peace. We would like full vessels of charity. We would like rich treasures of mercy. We would like cheerfulness to preside over all. We would like Jesus to be present. Amen. O loving day star, have you all looked up recently? Tonight, it's going to be a full moon. You may have seen a balloon. No comments about geopolitical underpinnings. You also may have seen a green comet. Anyone seen this green comet? The last time we and our Neanderthal and other ancestors have seen this green comet was 50,000 years ago. Might be another 50,000 until we see it again. Tonight you can still see it. If you look towards sunset, towards the North Star, it's green. You can see it with binoculars, I've heard, even with the naked eye, perhaps, if you're really good, get some good vision. There's a lot going on up there. Well, I felt like I was on a spacewalk. Yesterday morning, at the coldest point in this Arctic blast, as the thermometer read 10 degrees below, something deeply compelled me. So I opened my capsule front door, put on my astronaut hat and scarf and gloves, and plunged out into my neighborhood for a bit of a spacewalk. I was shocked, not by how cold it was, not by that cold, but by the hold. The hold of the sun's crystal clear rays, seemingly stronger than the ice crystals on our storm door. The hold of the quiet of my usually hurried street. The hold on my nose hairs instantly freezing together. But ultimately the hold of my home, not far away. The promise of a reliably warm place to return to soon. Truly, I didn't feel cold on that short walk because I was tethered. I was not lost in outer space, but I had a safe space to return to. And of course, beloveds, we know in our city and world, this is so often not the case. Too many lack a tether. That's why we're going to walk next week in solidarity. But not just about a lack of homes, but a lack of safety. The families of Tyree Nichols in Memphis know the horror. Too many people of color across this land fear for their very lives at the hands of those who are commissioned to protect and serve. A family of 13-year-old Tyler Lawrence here in Mattapan and Norwood know of the unimaginable pain, and no community is safe from the evil of firearms, of guns. It's that wash, rinse, repeat cycle that our Reverend Joshua so prophetically preached about last Sunday. And in contrast, there are those people who are basking in untethered greed and power, swimming in white privileges, the sin of supremacy. The contrast between those who need and those who lack is where we find ourselves on this Sunday, the 1st in February 2023. What does it feel like, though, to be cast out into space, into that vastness, disconnected, spinning, falling without a tether? It's incredibly scary if you've seen any of those sci-fi films, to be flipping through, unimaginably lonely. Friends, those of us who know of the connections to safe space need to recognize, as people of faith, it is not ours to hold on to alone. When we are tethered and others are not, we all risk that feeling of tumbling through eternity unconnected. Did you see the tethers in today's texts? So powerfully and prophetically read by Jesus this morning about another Jesus from Nazareth. who's unfurling on us the Beatitudes as recorded in Matthew. There were no self-ascenders or rock harnesses or space tethers maybe listed in this text. But I believe what is being described by Jesus here is that safe space, that brave space from which we can move forward in the work and in the movement. Jesus here is sketching out a blueprint of how community should work, how it should look like, and how we should be connected to it. Now, what strikes me this time is that Jesus is not being original in these words. I have long thought he was. I thought he crafted these from the sermon up here, the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. But as Hebrew scholars, Bible scholars have reminded me time and time again, he is simply recycling the Psalms and the prophets and Isaiah. These things that are lifted, maybe not the exact same poetic phrasing as he has, but these underpinnings of the ancestors of faith, that things are, and God is, and there are some old stories that are at play that need to be brought forward once again. Remember the context. Jesus has just been out in the wilderness for some 40 days. We're about to replicate that in our Lenten season. We're going to celebrate the Way of Curiosity here at Church of the Covenant this year. The 40 days in the wilderness. But remember the context too. The one who had gone before him, his cousin, his sibling in faith, his fellow movement maker, John the Baptist, had just been arrested and was soon to be executed by the state as a seditionist, as a threat to those clinging to the ways of inappropriate power. So this context, Jesus is then gathering. He's calling people out of their daily lives to come and follow, come and do something different. Make yourselves fish for folks, not just for animals. Make yourselves into something that I want you to be doing differently. And they'd already been doing some healing work. They'd already been doing some organizing. So Jesus is saying, you know what, come with me up onto this mountain and let's reflect. Let's reposition ourselves. There's been some stuff that's been going on that's been hard, and I want us to reconnect. So they go up to that mountain, and he assumes that seated position of a teaching rabbi and begins with these new phrasings of old ancient truths about right living and right relationship. Now I admit too that sometimes when I hear the Beatitudes from Matthew, I long for the ones in Luke, which are a little more hard-cutting, a little more focused on liberation theology. These, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the meek and the mild and the humble and the kind of the peacemakers. It just sometimes seems to fall short for what our world needs to hear right now. And that's why I really love this interpretation by modern Celtic John Philip Newell, read by Jesus for us this morning. I feel they're closer to the original meaning, the original Greek here, and the revolutionary push that Jesus was sounding in echoing the ancestors. Jesus is summoning community. He's charting what a safe space might look like. He's describing it poetically as a place where people are blessed. The one who mourns, the one who weeps, the one who is humble, the one who forgives, the one who hungers for earth's oneness, the one who is clear in heart, the one who longs for making peace, and the one who knows their need. So to all who would follow, Jesus spells it out. Be among such folk. Be such folk. Be the people who do these things. Yes, mourn when black lives still don't matter at the hands of militarized police. Yes, mourn and lament with Reverend Mariama White Hammond, who this past week on Radio Boston, in the spirit of humility that I think Jesus is calling us to, reminded us to put ourselves in the shoes of the parents of those Memphis police officers, wondering what has happened. Yes, in humility, find yourself in another perspective. Be close to that earth. Love it and help it get past these climate chaos and woes. Yes, do what you can to make peace, hunger, and thirst for justice, and then go do it. The blessings here are directives on how to live in right relationship. Blessed are the humble is often heard as blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. And I love the twist on this. The Greek meaning here behind meek much more connotes choosing not to take advantage of the position you have been given. Being meek, being humble is choosing not to oppress. And what happens when you don't oppress? You get land back. You inherit the earth. This is not inheriting some lofty heavenly realm or a throne somewhere far off that Jesus continues to chastise his disciples about, asking about. This is about the here and the now, inheriting land back if it's been taken away from you, indigenous kin. For those who have land, the question, what might we do with it? How might we make some reparations? Scholar Warren Carter reminds us about Matthew's gospel, saying that this gospel portrays the Roman imperial order as standing under divine condemnation. Matthew's Jesus outlines practices for an alternative society that his followers are to enact. Jesus is writing a script in a new way. It's counter to empire, and it's going to lead to more oppression of those who promote it. But not just oppression, liberation. Blessed are those who know their need, for theirs is the grace of heaven. Now, often this one is translated as blessed are the poor in spirit. And again, sometimes that's interpreted as those who are meek, those who are off to the sides, who are self-deprecating, self-doubting. It is far from the original meaning of this text. Jewish annotated New Testament reminds us and points us to Isaiah 61 in this verse. Isaiah 61, we know, is the one that Jesus lifts up in the beginning of Luke's gospel, that great Jubilee text. The Spirit of God is upon me because God has anointed me to bring good news to the oppressed, bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim liberty to the captives, release to the prisoners, and proclaim the year of God's Jubilee, comforting all those who mourn, giving them a garland instead of ashes, oil of gladness instead of mourning, a mantle of praise instead of a faint spirit. Jesus is saying, yes, injustice is real, trauma is real, oppression is hard, and the poor in spirit know all of that. But their full story does not end here without them knowing their need for liberation and jubilee, and the promise of one day receiving an oil of gladness, a mantle of praise, not a spirit of meekness or faint-heartedness. So friends, those of us who want to live into this Sermon on the Mount, this first public address of Jesus after summoning people into this movement, I suggest would be good to remember that it is our invitation to break free of the tethers that bind us and to help support and build those tethers for those who do not have them. Remember, this metaphor cuts both ways. There are structures, there are practices that too many of us are linked to in bad ways. Capitalism, white supremacy, an over-reliance on militarized police, thinking that that's going to keep our safety and our streets safe. All of these things are so deeply ingrained in many of us that we need to break free from those. And so finding communities of faith that critique those things and call ourselves through our texts and our traditions to higher ground is part of the answer, friends. That's why today we're gathering not just in worship, but we're gathering with food, and we're gathering to celebrate in an annual meeting what God has been about and what God might be inviting us to in the future. A God that doesn't just call us to safe spaces, but to brave spaces, to Nicaragua, where it's hot, and there's mosquitoes, and it's a little hard and uncomfortable to be away from your family and friends, and yet to be meeting and reminded that you have other family and friends, your chosen family that chooses you. Dulce Nombre de Jesus chooses each and every one of us, whether we are there right now or whether we are here in solidarity. We are chosen, we are tethered to a much broader landscape. Too often the United States thinks of itself as a city on a hill. I'm sorry, Ronald Reagan, you got that way wrong. And all those who would follow to remember, even Boston lifting itself. Friends, if we reposition that and think about Dulce Nombre de Jesus as a city on a hill, how might that reframe the way we live and work? And may we then receive that light as people who need to get, once again, salty and shining. Friends, I pray that we would remember that we are connected, that we would know our need, even when it's hard. Maybe one of the hardest things to know our need, beyond the basic needs, beyond the emotional needs, beyond the spiritual needs, knowing the needs deep within ourselves to be fully who God calls us to be. Our son Rowan has been getting into rock climbing recently. It's not spacewalking, but indeed you are tethered often to a rope. We started by doing some indoor bouldering where there's no rope, and then as soon as Rowan was connected to this auto belay, it's just an automatic belay, it's a rope that goes up, we saw him scale this wall, going from 5 feet to 10 to 20 to 30 feet up. Friends, when we are tethered, when we are secure, we can do courageous things that we thought we never could. And I pray that we as a church would know no limits in the work of the ministry of Jesus in this place and beyond, and that we would remind ourselves that we are safe and secure, and God has our back. We have each other's back. May we do so, and may we climb together, knowing that we are salt